You go.
Hey, everybody, welcome to our first Geek Speak of 2025. Welcome back. Thanks for joining us. Today, we
Mm.
are talking about exploring web design trends for 2025. I am Greg McKinnon with Original 72, and today we also have with us.
I'm Rena Little from Littleworks Indie Media.
Well, we're the first one of the year, and I like this topic because obviously I do all web design, web development stuff. I know your business does a lot of that stuff too, so you're deep into
Yeah.
this topic as well. I hope you're as jazzed as I am.
I am actually. This is super fun part for me. We did a version of this last year, which was really fun. And you don't really think about things changing super drastically year over year, and you don't really think about um, the way that web design is organized in terms of trends because we don't want to be too trendy. That's one thing that we don't want. We don't want something that's going to be completely wrong the next year or even a few years down the road.
Mhm.
But one of the things that I loved about our conversation on Tuesday, we'll get into the details, obviously, what we think, where we think website design is going. But one of the things that I loved looking at was realizing that a lot of the big brands they're really tight with their branding, and then they make design changes every regularly. So we were looking at Apple in particular, and they make design changes on their site every single time they release a product and it's so their branding is so tight that you don't really notice it necessarily. Like it just looks so beautiful. It's like just a shift, subtle shifts. So I want us to think about that because how often are we going on and making adjustments on our websites? Well, I know for a fact that I'm doing a whole rebrand this year, so I have not been updating or improving my website design over the last couple of years for sure, because I knew this big shift was coming for me. But I do like the idea, and I do press upon my clients, even with their logos, like they should be updated regularly for font and color, so that they don't look stale, dated, and that you don't really notice the shift as you move. I think the similar approach to websites is really great. Is let's look at that homepage more regularly. Let's see how we can tweak that, and especially since we're looking at websites as funnels now, like we look at the homepage as a funnel, and we're asking our marketers to provide, results and data. We need to be adjusting those funnels so that we can actually um, create the results that we're asked to provide.
Mhm.
So with that in mind, sorry,
I was just going to
with
reiterate the what you said there in that I think people think of web design as like completely
once and done.
changing everything,
Yeah,
as
yeah,
opposed
yeah,
to the subtle tweaks that you could make even quarterly, every
yeah,
half year or yearly on
yeah,
the um, maybe some things with your header or footer or just the
yeah,
way your content is laid out. And it has, like you were saying, it has nothing to do with branding or changing colors or doing
yeah.
major changes.
Or it
They're just
could.
little things that will make
Yeah,
things better for the
yeah.
usability of your site for all of your customers.
Yeah, so I think I was even talking maybe the last Geek Speak or the one before about a client where we did change her colors, but they were such subtle changes that she didn't even really notice the color changes when I presented them to her. She was like, "Oh, they look the same," you know? And that's sort of in the vein. So what we were attempting to do there was to increase the contrast for better accessibility, which is an improvement to your website. So it
Mhm.
didn't need a huge, we weren't trying to convince her to change her entire palette. Sometimes we want to add just a slightly different color so that we can make the contrast greater between two colors, because I do get sometimes the palette comes to me and it's kind of all mid-range. There's nothing really dark, there's nothing really light except for the white and black sometimes. But what you really want is some contrast in there. So we're going to go through some of the trends that we looked at for this year. And when we talk about trends, we want to think about them more as directions that design is going into, rather than complete changes or things that are going to be too trendy. So we didn't include anything that was trendy, which is a different thing than trend. I think we need to really be clear on the word. And as always, you want to make sure that your brand maintains its integrity, and that you're not, we're focusing um, on the objective of the website. That's so. Do you want to bring us into the first sort of grouping of ideas, Greg?
Yeah, did you want to start with your notes?
Sure. Okay.
Okay.
Or
Um,
wherever, it doesn't really matter.
well,
We've got a lot.
yeah, we were, because maybe because it's the first. I maybe feel like I'm a little bit less prepared because
Sure,
we have
yeah.
our notes in separate spots. We didn't really combine them together to be cohesive in the topic. So I I think we should just go with yours, and I'll sprinkle in some of the things
Okay, sure.
that are posted. So yeah, in your stuff here, your initial point was using your own visuals, um,
Right.
and this the larger header for this is that there's a fine line between designing a site and having a site that converts. So all of these will relate to that sort of a feel. So what do you what are your feelings about your own visuals, and what does that mean to you? Or are you talking um, like not using stock photography or like
Yeah.
AI generated stuff, or where can
Yeah.
you
So,
expand on what you feel there?
yeah, sure. So it's always best to utilize imagery that you've created that is brand specific and um, um, function specific also, so that if you're creating a header, you might be having a photography session with a branding photographer who's going to help you create some visuals. If you're going to do that, always make sure you bring your web designer in before that branding um, session happens, because if we have an idea of how we want the website to flow and what kind of pieces are necessary, then we can help the photographer set those up so that we're not, again, sitting there trying to crop images, or you know create an image that has the aspect ratio, horizontal aspect ratio, when the branding photographer has focused on you as a person and they're mostly portrait style, so that vertical aspect ratio. So it's really good. I get handed branded photography files a lot. When somebody has decided, first we're going to do the branding photography, then we're going to go to the website designer, then we're going to get it developed, and then we're going to start the marketing. And really, you want all of those things to be in a plan at the
Mm-hmm.
beginning that's cohesive. If you want a really light, airy, and sparse website, then you don't want to work with with a photographer who's got dark backgrounds and who puts you in front of a dark background. Like, that's not going to work very well. I mean, it could if high contrast is part of it, but not necessarily. So you really want to have that thinking piece at the very beginning, that strategy, that how does this website work? What do we want our marketing to do? That strategy piece is super important. So yes, definitely create your own visuals. That could be your own illustrations, your own photography, your own videos. If you are working with stock, then let's think about the stock differently. So instead of thinking about stock, and we kind of get stuck in this, a lot of a lot of clients think that they're going to get like some kind of template, and then they're going to send us content that we're going to just fit in to different spaces, and we're going to ask them for content that fits here and there and everywhere, in a photo for here. But really, we want unified messaging throughout. So we want um, we want to also be thinking about, what does that homepage do? What is the function of that homepage? So if I'm going to use stock photography, I want to think about, what is my message, and what imagery is going to help me get that message across? How am I going to leverage that message better using the imagery? What imagery works best? So instead of illustrating from the client perspective, which tends to be default of how clients think about their website or how they want their website organized, um, if they've got something in mind. So if they're like, I was just using the example before we got on, if they're an acupuncturist, sometimes they want like a photo of a back with a whole bunch of needles stuck in it, and you can get tons of those on stock photography. But that's not necessarily going to be the best to convert a client into your business. We want to tell the story, it's almost like the success story of the client on the homepage. And so what does that look like? So what kind of imagery do we need to create to get that across? And if we're looking at the messaging, um, um, like the text piece, what is really going to help create that text forward? You want like the text, the header, the call to action, and the image to all be cohesive in in that one messaging piece that we're looking to put on that part of the homepage, right?
Mhm.
So that's sort of how I'm thinking about that.
It's
So
all
yes,
about the feelings and emotions for me
yeah,
on web or in any marketing material, because that's
yeah,
where you're going to hit the customer the biggest, is
yeah,
giving them the feeling or the emotion that will trigger them to fall in love with your brand or
that's
buy the
right.
product or whatever it
Yeah,
is. And that has nothing to do with, what the image is, if it relates directly to your product or your service.
well,
It just
it
needs
does.
to completely evoke that emotion out of the customer with the messaging
Yes,
that will get
yeah,
will do that, right? So it
yeah,
could be,
yeah,
as you're in your acupuncture example, it could be something of an image that has nothing to do with acupuncture, but gives the feeling and emotion, and the copy that you're talking about needs to relate to provide that and give that emotion to the customer.
yeah. Yeah, exactly. So I actually do think that it needs to relate at the because but it should not be illustrative. So that's usually my rule. I ask the question: Is this photo illustrative of what I'm trying to say, or is it evocative of what I'm trying to say? So there's two different ways of thinking about those photos, and sometimes it's hard to tell, and the line can be fine. And we definitely want to create, we don't want to have the same imagery that everybody else has got. So if you're doing like a health and wellness website of any kind, you want to make sure that your imagery is not exactly the same as everyone. If you look at health and wellness sites in particular, many of them, especially naturopathic sites, they're all green. Like someone's done like at one point, they're all green, and it makes me crazy.
Yeah.
So that might not be great, because you actually want to pop yourself out of your competition through nothing crazy, but something that actually makes sense for your branding. So that's it. Shouldn't just because green, means health and growth and all of those things that comes with naturopathy, there's got to be something else in there that helps to set yourself apart from everyone else. So that's why it's important to work with professionals, in my mind, anyways, because
Yeah.
we don't always know the right decision to make
Yeah.
in something that's not our field. Um, so it's not really that. It's while we always ask. I think Greg, you probably do the same. We always ask for websites that you find pleasing.
Hmm.
That doesn't mean we're going to do something like that. It means that we're going to take certain elements and aspects and user experience and all of that, and we want to make sure that we're getting something that you like. But I had the unfortunate experience of working with somebody who wanted me to basically pastiche two websites together, and they had very two different approaches to user experience. And at a certain point, we got to a block, which I could see coming down the road. We came to a block because if you use two different user experiences and have two different ways of speaking about the same thing, and have two different pages that are pretty much the same, it's
Hmm.
not useful, it's not helpful for the user. So we had to sort of reorganize at the last minute, but it took me until that very end point to actually get that point across to the client that pastiching two sites together or pastiching multiple things together is not a good idea. It's much better to sort of bring your ideas and then sort of pull back and let's see what happens, and trust your professional.
Mhm.
Okay, but I don't want to really get onto a
Yeah, I want
soapbox.
to
That
move
wasn't
on
really my
from the
intention.
images, and we
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
were talking a little bit of design related stuff, and I want to go over a
yeah.
couple other design points that I had that were going to be things or things that are becoming a lot more popular and probably big for 2025 is um, that I'm seeing a lot more bold and large font choices
Yeah,
uh,
yeah.
to grab people's attentions with short
Mhm.
statements, and then this more subtle text underneath. But I believe that that sort of trend is going to continue, having that large bold font caption grabber to get people's attention to then focus on the more smaller stuff that you're
Mhm.
saying in that section.
Yeah.
I'm also seeing um, the possibility of color trends becoming more simple and
Mhm.
soothing
Mhm.
to the eye as opposed to bold and
Mhm.
in your face. And I believe that one might be more for the accessibility, contrasting things, and stuff like that. I don't know what your feelings are on both font
Yeah.
and
Well,
color trends.
yeah, so yeah, I did actually see a reference to brutalism, which if you don't know what that design style is, don't bother looking it up now because it's had a short moment and is gone again. And it comes up every now and again in web design. I'm not really sure why it sort of comes up at regular intervals, but basically you're right, a more simple type design, and sort of creating collections of ideas throughout the page through that grid. What was that grid, the grid style
The
called, that I
bento,
forgot what
the
it's.
bento
Yeah,
grids.
yeah, that's right, bento grids.
Yeah.
And back to your large font, so somebody was actually suggesting that you can use the large font as one of your imagery pieces in your bento box style thing, so that actually replaces imagery. And you do see that a lot. Like I've seen a lot of websites where the header, where the hero image would be, is like this giant text piece. And
It's
so
just a
that
big,
I see.
bold statement. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, which I like. And I guess immersiveness. So when we think about it, so instead of having like the classic WordPress template look where you've got photo and then you've got statement and then you've got three columns with a photo, and you know what I mean, instead of doing that, it's really is more sort of down the funnel collections of pieces that go down that tell a story, and the messaging is really concise and on point. So like not lengthy explanations, and just enough information to get somebody excited to make that call to, take that call to action, whether it's jumping on a call with you or making a purchase or booking something. That's what we're looking for. So yeah, I totally agree with all of those
I
things.
feel like what
Uh,
you just mentioned also leads into another point that you had down below here, which was looking at whether the design was useful or annoying.
yes, that's right.
Because
That,
there are a lot of and also the from the annoying point of view, I know later on we've touched on scrolling within
yeah,
websites, and that would be fall under that annoyance factor.
yeah,
Some of the scrolling designs and how the browser you can manipulate your design to scroll down, scroll sideways, and do all these
yeah,
things that
yeah, yeah,
that I find are probably more on the annoying side
yeah.
for the user.
So there's this classification of design things. This is in my mind. It doesn't exist in, I don't know if design, universities talk about this differently. But so it reminds me of fashion industry. So when they actually figured out a way to create vibrant neon colors on cotton, there was in the 19, I think it was the late 80s or the mid 80s, they found a way. to do this. That was a new technology, and then all of a sudden you see neon colors on cotton everywhere. Everyone's wearing them. So we want to avoid that in our web design um, choices and our branding. So if there's anything that's super interesting and new and gorgeous, and we all get attracted to novelty. Um, but what ends up happening, we had a font that came out once, and even the ombre style design, sometimes you see it everywhere. And so again, it's one of those things where it's really hard to distinguish your company from other companies. There was that font that's really tall with small serifs, like small horizontal lines, very tall vertical lines.
Hmm.
And I saw it everywhere, and I really liked it. I actually used it myself in a couple of instances, but it sort of like got saturated, and then it's everywhere, and then everyone drops it. So it does become problematic. So you can use that stuff in your social, maybe, all, and maybe on your postcards that you're putting out, or something, or like a small series of things that you're going to do that are time related. And then, but it's not really something that you want on your website. You don't want to be doing all of your font with that. I did see somebody do that, and then now their site looks so out. So yeah, so the technology glitchy, like not glitchy stuff, but what's it called, like the fascinating new
The smooth
technology.
scroll.
Yeah, like that scroll thing, is it goes into that category. Any of those things you want to be really careful implementing into your website, because your website, you don't want to have to change it that often. Like when I say look at it every year and see what's working, what's not working, I don't mean do a major overhaul. I just mean sort of changing your messaging and maybe swapping out a photo, trying testing a new photo or something in the space. But if you've actually implemented that scrolling thing that Greg's talking about, where you scroll down the page and then all of a sudden the site starts going left to right. It's kind of like one of those things that pleases designers at the beginning, but it doesn't actually work very well for clients or users. And that's the thing that you want to sort of think about when somebody tries to introduce an aspect that looks very novelty oriented, because it'll just have a brief period of time.
Yeah, I definitely always am more. I see a lot of clients over the years who have been like, "Oh my God, I love this site. It's so great," and it's like super heavily designed and graphical.
Yeah,
Um, I'm always like, "What is this going to accomplish for like you
yeah,
as something the both of us have
yeah.
watched? You're not a design an animation design studio. Your website
No,
doesn't need to be this
that is
graphical, heavy
correct.
moving characters all over the place. You're
Yeah,
either trying to sell a product or you're trying to sell a service, right?
yeah.
Forget about how the wow factor of how cool something looks and really dive deep into the functionality of how a website can do something to make your business get more sales or get more customers.
Yeah, so that is one of our other points, which is conversions are huge right now. So that is actually a trend in website design, is we're designing now for conversions, which took a really long time, because at one time you would get a website designer to do your site and they knew not much about development or marketing, and it would look really pretty, but it wouldn't do anything. And you'd by the same token, you'd get a developer, they would do like the slickest coding, the most beautiful, fastest site you ever had. But again, it didn't really convert anyone, and sometimes it looked awful. And then you'd get a marketer, and they would put bells and whistles in the form of like underlines and bold and arrows to the click button and all of that stuff. It looked ugly and it converts, but it doesn't really give a good brand experience. And they were often heavy sites. So yeah, so conversion is everything. So everything should be super sleek and software wise, not that many plugins, because speed is one of the things that really helps with conversions. Had If you have everything on your site, like if you've got hundreds and hundreds of blog articles, and you've got a WooCommerce plugin, and you're using Elementor, which is a really heavy plugin, and you're using, and you're using Monster to, is it Monster? I think is the plugin that they use to look at the stats on your website instead of Google
Yeah,
Analytics.
monster
Yeah,
analytics.
so if
Yeah.
if you've got and you're using Jetpack, which helps things
Mm.
from a certain perspective, you've got
No.
too much on your website. It's too heavy. Half the traffic that you're going to get, and even maybe even more than half, but I'd say comfortably half, are going to leave because it's taking 3 seconds to load. Like we had that issue with one of our clients, and you know, um, it really does affect your business, your site speed. So it's got to be lean. So somebody needs to be reusing and repurposing your old blog articles for organic SEO, and you should have like sort of a limited number of, limit the amount of stuff that you have on your website, because more is not always better, right?
Absolutely. And I want to mention one additional thing on top of that, which I think is a little bit of I mean, not exactly what you were talking about, but it's kind of also not just design and what you're using on your site related, but also choosing the right host, make sure it's, a
Yes.
fast host so your site is loading properly. And I am seeing a lot more focus in with people building websites on trying to go the sustainable route. So people
Yes.
are considering that where their hosting is it green hosting, and I think that will obviously
Mhm.
continue as we move forward.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. For sure. So, did we have, I just want to take a look at our notes to just see if we hit most of the things.
I think
Um,
we, I think we did. There's one thing that I
yeah.
really wanted to touch on, actually
Hmm.
two things, but one big. I don't know if this is more a 2025 trend or just a 2025 shift continuing, is
Hmm.
with AI generation of websites and tools that can help you put content, use AI to generate content within your sites and layouts within your sites, and as well as AI generated images. I um, I'm fine with the fact of using these tools um, to help you or to help clients get started. But I fear that we will start to see sites that you just know were just generated with AI. And you don't
So,
want that. You want to use the tool to help you, but you don't
yeah.
want your website or your images to look like they were just done,
Okay.
half-assed AI.
I have some thoughts on this too. A slight deviation from what you've said, or distinction actually, because I think you're a little bit more on board with this than. But I've been looking at AI um, developed sites. I actually did one myself just to see what it was like. The site itself is fine. The site design worked fine in my mind. It's the imagery that I take issue with. So, and I think that's what your point was, is that it's the imagery that's going to be problematic. And we're not alone in that thought. So one of the I forgot his name, but one of the people that I follow for web design stuff, he was actually saying that you can see on, and he had quite good examples, and maybe I'll put some in the comments after this. He had some really good examples of sites that did in fact use AI. What the problem is, and they're also trying to like create a mood rather than illustrate, which we all thought was what we want. That's really what we want to do. We spoke about that earlier. But he's right. All of the AI generative website or imagery on sites were of like the cosmos or this big sort of sunburst or this. They were all very similar. And interestingly enough, I was watching this a video from this woman who was talking about the legal aspects of using AI generated images online. As this was in particular to social media, but when you do that, you've used yourself. So have you seen all those people, the people that have been organizing their faces as old people, or they've been there's like one app that keeps following me around that creates professional looking LinkedIn style photos from whatever snapshot you happen to have taken. If you do that on and Facebook allows you, there's an AI spot in its um, in the ad section. If you do that, those images do not belong to you. And if you've put yourself in those images, then they have the right to take the image of you that you've used AI to create and put that on everyone else's advertising. So you can see where the problem is in that. And I don't think that's going to last for much longer. I think that we'll have another class action lawsuit on that in the next, but it'll take like a little while before that comes about. But that's one of the things that we're going to have to deal with is copyright issues when you use AI to as a big part of your branding. So I don't recommend it at this point. The websites I'm not sure about. I can't even tell who owns the website that I've created, and I don't even know where it's hosted. Like that's how the company is organized. So I've got to go and do a deeper dig on that. But for now, I didn't mind the way that the site turned out. It actually surprised me. So
Maybe a
that's
future
where we're
topic
at.
for you later in the year. You could tell
Yeah,
your experience
yeah,
with this
yeah,
AI generated website.
yeah. I'd love to do that. That's a good idea.
Well, I
All
think
right.
we got through most of our
Mm-hmm.
stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
we didn't mention a couple of things that were going away, but that's okay. They're going away. We don't need to know about them.
Read the
um,
blog post.
yeah, thanks again, everybody, for joining us.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rena. And next week, if you guys want to join us for Geek Speak, you're going to be on with Pittman Phelan, and they are, because we're early on the year, we're doing another trends for 2025, and it's going to be trends for e-commerce. So that should be a good one as well
Oh,
for
excellent.
anybody who's selling online.
Yeah, and if you'd like to join us, we have a community in the Business Marketing Mixer Facebook group. So that's where we are. You can ask questions or post your stuff and join other marketers or people who are interested in marketing. We're looking to grow that community. So feel free to join us. Thanks a lot.
Great. Thanks, everybody.